This is Volunteer Radio. In the program Insights, now we bring you a discussion on surgical strikes and India's firepower. The participants are Air Vice Marshal retired Kapil, strategic analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, journalist.
We are discussing an event which occurred on the intervening night of September 28th and 29th, 2016. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had ordered what are called the surgical strikes across multiple locations in Pakistan, technically across the LOC in Pakistan. Air Marshal Kak, can we discuss this matter in detail today? This is almost 6 years. How do you see these strikes 6 years later? A lot of things have happened since then. There have been an air surgical strike in February 2019. There has been abrogation of 370. There has been a perceptive difference at the LOC, where the firing levels have gone down. How do you see 6 years down the line, sir?
Well, there are multiple issues here, and I think how was before and how was it after. 2014, coming in Prime Minister Narendra Modi, let's recall that in a very sweeping change in policy as a respect to his enunciation of neighborhood first, he invited the SAARC leaders for his swearing in. Surprising, even his Ministry of External Affairs, which did not know about. And so it was the Prime Minister's personal initiative in that sense. But then the other side is, I'm marking the ups and downs. The other side, the High Commissioner here started inviting the Hurriyat leaders here in Delhi prior to the Foreign Secretary level meeting, which of course was breaching of a red line because a new dispensation had come in. And thus there was great hope generated that there is a breakthrough after all in India-Pakistan relations. But we saw a week later, on the 2nd of Jan, the attack in Pathankot. So there are these major ups and downs. We see that the relationship, you have a major attack on a brigade headquarters where personnel are actually resting, sleeping at night, and they're struck by the Jaish-e-Mohammed terror group, in which I think 19 of our soldiers lost their lives. And this caused, without a shade of doubt, as the Prime Minister himself said it, a rage amongst the army, and of course the nation itself. So there had to be a riposte, and the riposte was the 28th September 16, where secret operations were undertaken under the co-commander of Srinagar, 15 Corps Lieutenant General Satish Dua. Commando forces were employed. So there was a risk element of risk in this. Very meticulously planned across, as I was just stating, across a wide frontage. 5 or 6 of these terror launch pads were struck devastatingly. And these were all, as I said, commando operations. Heavy weapons were not used. The orders were very clear that there would be no collateral damage. It is understood that about 35 to 70 Pakistan terrorists got killed. Of course, Pakistan admitted only 2 got killed and 9 got wounded. But the important part is that our army commandos returned safely, unscathed before sunrise. Now, this is God nature of the operation. But there are big lessons from here. There is also a fact, you are more than aware, Ajay, than anyone else, that if you look at the relation 6 years, 2002 to 2008 was a golden period of India-Pakistan. Terrorists virtually isolated. Terror figures came down drastically from nearly 4,000 a year to something like 500 a year. And that sustained itself until Mumbai. Once again, despite Mumbai, the government in power returned. But then the people of India, the governing elite, the establishment in India said, we've had enough. So some new unrestrained response has to be made to terror attacks by Pakistan, so that there are signals sent not only to the Pakistanis, to our domestic constituencies, and indeed the whole world, that India means business in another way. So therefore, no terror attack of a major kind will go unpunished. There will be costs imposed. And so this is the signal that was. We need to look at it in strategic terms, that on 28th September 16, when this surgical strike was done, it was a signal that henceforth such kind of operations by the adversary will not remain unpunished.
After this happened, the government took it upon itself that Lieutenant General Ranbir Singh, who was in the DGMO, announced it live on television that the surgical strikes have been conducted. We had held back the surgical strikes till the then Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj was speaking at the UN General Assembly. The moment that she spoke, we launched a surgical strike, and importantly, we announced to the world that the surgical strikes have taken place. We have hit multiple spots across the LOC. How do you see this change, Kaksa?
This is exactly what I was inferring, that it was a multi-dimensional, multi-track signaling of a new India and how it would handle terror action through A, military action, B, a certain element of restraint, C, that there will be minimal collateral damage so that our brothers and sisters in Pakistan, who as people don't mean ill, but if there's an establishment which overrides factors of humanitarianism and friendly relations between countries, then signaling will be done to them by neutralizing the terror launch pad in whatever situation we are faced with in terms of a terror attack. I think by and large that process, as you yourself said, has remained a kind of a sustained policy. It was not just Uri was not a one-off one. And we saw that in the terror domain, escalation dynamics were also handled extremely well. This was a lower level of threshold. Then when we saw the CRPF bus, which was going through on the national highway and not far from Pulwama, when that was struck, then there was another similar kind of a dilemma facing the politico-military leadership. What do we do now? Because this time earlier, it was 19 soldiers who were sleeping in Uri in the brigade headquarters at night, and they were struck and killed. This time it was a double the number. 40 soldiers were killed. So the reaction, I'm not looking at it as a arithmetical term, but the reaction had to be escalated. And the government once again took that risk. Once again, same set of objectives as I just outlined, that signals have to be sent, intentions have to be made absolutely unambiguous so that no such thing happens again. And we've seen from 2019 when we did Balakot as a retaliation to the targeting of the CRPF troops in the valley, that Balakot was again exactly the same, restrained, dramatic, totally secret, multiple approaches to the target from aircraft and precision-guided munitions employed. I mean, those are state-of-the-art precision-guided munitions that you don't even see the building coming down, but you have the building top have holes in it so that the warhead will actually explode on the flora you want it to explode. That level of precision. And so the building was intact, and yet it is known that approximately 200 to 250 of the Jaish-e-Mohammed training cadre killed. So I think that's one more.
Sir, also our listeners have read these stories in the media that the then Army Commander General Hooda said that he had his resignation letter in his pocket if the surgical strikes failed, so he would have tendered his resignation. How do you see this as a military man?
That shows that the military is more than confident that these operations will be very delicately poised. They will be planned to perfection. They will reflect the high level of professionalism of the Indian Armed Forces, including their political leadership and the military leadership. And most importantly, at level of coordination. These are military and political, or what is termed politico-military operations. So I think what General Hooda said, who was the army commander under whom these operations were launched by the Corps Commander General Satish Dua, I think that was very, very relevant and operationally required.
A lot of people don't understand the difference between, or rather our listeners need to be refreshed with their memory. These strikes were launched at multiple locations across a frontage of almost 170 kilometers across the LOC. Why did we choose to send in your belief, why did we choose to send in, say, special forces instead of launching, say, long-range weapons or something at these terror camps? What is the difference between the two?
Launching of long-range weapons has a sort of an escalation because then you're going into depth area. Whereas our purpose, and I think I agree with the military wisdom of that operation, that we chose the launch pad in the immediate vicinity where the terrorists physically would be eliminated. Because when you go to depth areas, then you are handling actually the Pakistan army element. So that is not the purpose. Purpose was to send a signal that this is a terror act. It will be responded in such a way that the actors of terrorism will be hurt the maximum. Of course, there are a mix of the regular army and the terrorists at or near the vicinity of these camps.
AVM Kak, since February 2021, since the two DGMOs famously spoke and the firing across the LOC has literally stopped. Previous Army Chief General Naravne is on record having said it publicly that the firing across the LOC has come down considerably. The data with the army also shows the same thing, that the firing has come down. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken told Pakistan Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari that you better have a better relation with India. These things, do they indicate that some kind of normalcy or some kind of peace would come at the LOC, especially for the residents on both sides across the LOC, sir?
I think in bilateral relations, there are internal, what I call back channels, which was so ably represented by Tariq Aziz from Pakistan and Kapil from India. Unfortunately, both of them passed on in quick succession. But there are also external back channels. And I believe that we had our friends from the Arab world, I don't mean to name the countries, who helped in the process of trying to restore a degree of normalcy to a very volatile, fragile, and uncertain line of control, with high caliber mortars being exchanged more or less on a daily basis. I had the privilege to travel all the way from nearly Ranbir Singhpura to Uri, all along the line, visiting homes of people, visiting panchayats, visiting groups of people. There are community schools which operate from bunkers. And I mean, the normal life is disturbed on both sides, and I'm glad it is external elements who had to prevail upon the wisdom of the leadership on both sides to say, why don't you adhere to the ceasefire agreement of 2003, which had been agreed by both sides, but soon sort of fell apart. And then firing has been going around, and sometimes there is caliber escalation. You go from a normal, assault rifle to light mortars, heavier mortars, and very heavy mortars. Occasionally, artillery has also been used. So I think that was a very good step, and you're absolutely spot on, Ajay, by saying that due attention to the two sides and relative peace as observed. But I think we need to also make note of the fact that purely DGMO level agreement, which is a military one, had in it paragraphs which talked about core values of each other, which talked about restoration of peace, this is all political stuff. So therefore, unfortunately, we have not moved on that political stuff. And to answer your question very specifically, I tend to agree with you that there is some degree of a back channel operating between India and Pakistan, and not with external assistance. So it has sustained that progress we have kept from the agreement which was arrived in February 2021, and that is continuing till today. So the line of control and border between the two countries is absolutely quiet, and people have come back to doing their harvesting, schools are functioning, normal life has been restored. I want to also draw attention to 3 or 4 other aspects. First is that political decision-making based on military input would remain the course for many, many decades in India, Pakistan. Leadership, both political and military, have to show nerves of steel when dealing with crisis situations. And we've seen this happen in the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia earlier I think year and a half, 2 years back, and of course now in Ukraine. A restraint has to be, contrary to what Putin is doing in the conflict in Ukraine, threat of use of nuclear weapons. India and Pakistan have never used those expressions, even when they have gone to war.
AVM Kak, how the surgical strikes of 2016 ordered on the November 28th and the night which ended on the early hours of September 29th, 2016 have changed the dynamics of the Indo-Pak relations, especially across the LOC, and things have changed. Thank you for speaking to us, sir.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on surgical strikes and India's firepower. The participants were Air Vice Marshal Retired Kapil Kak, strategic analyst, and Ajay Banerjee, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.